Hello and welcome everyone, this is Calebovitsch coming to you with another episode of Deck Check. Today I will be taking a look at the newest promo card, Lastlight Judgment, and wondering about its impact on the Expedition format. Get it? Impact because it's a nuke or a solar blast that is decimating the whole board and the whole game state at that. Okay, let's just cue the deck list. This card you're seeing here is the newest promo in Eternal Card Game. It is called Lastlight Judgment. It costs a lot, it has a huge requirement, it has a huge impact, and it is, in my opinion, and not only in my opinion, the best build-around promo card that is out there. With the previous ones such as Marius Mandrake also and Traverse Farm also being great build-around cards. As for Judgment itself, it is a 15 cost, one of each influence spell that says kill everything, just like that. And by everything, they do mean everything. It includes all units, it includes all sites, it includes all relics, it includes all curses. Also, each player discards their hand and loses all of their power. Night falls and it never ends. And Lastlight Judgment costs 3 less for each power that has been decimated this game. Alright, let's take it one sentence at a time. Kill everything. Cool. Each player discards their hand and loses all of their power. Cool, but you have to do something about that. So as, well, in all card games, when it comes to all equalizing board state effects, such as Balance, such as Armageddon, such as Wrath of God, you are looking for getting the best deal because you are usually sacrificing a card or an effect to achieve the goal of killing everything of one aspect or another. Here, you gotta make certain that you come out ahead when the board is dead, when no one has any hands, when you just have influence, because influence is the only thing that lasts. Each player discards their hand and loses all of their power. That also means, and I have experimented with this card a lot, this means that everyone loses all their max power and their current power. So that means you cannot combo it with certain cards that I'm going to show you in a moment. Night falls and never ends. What is Nightfall? When you start a turn at night, draw an additional card and take 1 damage, which means after the blast, each player draws 2 cards instead of 1 at the start of their turn and loses 1 health, which is a ticking clock on everyone. And as with all Nightfall effects, remember the opponent is the first one getting the additional card, but is also the first one to die to the so-called Nightfall Lethal. And remember, Nightfall Lethal, best lethal, no discussion. Second best lethal is middle lethal, obviously, at least for me. Also, Lastlight Judgment costs 3 less for each power that has been decimated this game. So, since the Flame of Zolta and in Echoes of Eternity, there are some cards with the Decimate keyword. And Decimate means that when you play a card with Decimate, you can choose to lose 1 maximum power to gain an additional effect. It ranges from creating units off of emblems, invoking cards, and doing some other cool stuff. Now, so far, at least as the Flame of Zolta went, there has been only several cards that did something when you were decimating power, when you were about to decimate power, or gained benefits when you decimated power. This is another one of them. And also, you gotta remember, even if you're not playing this deck, but you know that this card is out there, that the power that has been decimated this game counts on both sides of the board, so for you and for the opponent. So in a Lastlight Judgment mirror match, for example, if your nuke costs 0, the opponent's nuke costs 0. That's about it. Okay, so what can we do to break this card, or in other terms, make it work in your favor? Okay, I'm gonna start things off with saying that I've played around 80 or 90 games with decks centered around this card. Mainly the one that you're gonna see in a moment, but I've also experimented with a couple of others that were not as successful. As for this one, Yes, let's take everything when it comes to Lastlight Judgment one sentence at a time. Kill everything. How can you benefit from getting everything killed? And I'm gonna limit this to Expedition, but for Throne there is one additional card I'm going to mention in a moment. So when you're killing everything, two beneficial things for you trigger, for the opponent as well. Entomb. Entomb is one of them, and that is, does something when it is killed. Well, there are not a ton of Entomb effects out there right now in the Expedition format. For example, dealing 3 damage to the enemy player off of the Grenadin, Cinder Motoda, giving you a 4/4 Cinder Dragon with flying. But as I've already said, unfortunately your current power resets to 0 as well, so you don't have any power to cast the Cinder Dragon, and it costs 6, and you have 0 max power, so that's not really a combo. You can, well, some of them give your opponent something, and that's not what you want to be doing. There is a card called Shavka's Embrace. If it's your turn, draw 7 cards, reduce their cost by 1. At the end of your turn, discard your hand, which could be slightly beneficial because you're usually then playing a power and a thing that costs 1 or 2. But that's not a whole lot, and this costs 9, has a triple requirement, and is, I believe, meant for other combo decks. The most obvious inclusion of how to be ahead when Lastlight Judgment is getting cast is having a Waystone Gate in play, and I believe most people already know this interaction, because this relic has an Entomb effect that if this one dies on your turn, you get to play an 8/8 giant, which means if you have a Waystone Gate in play and you play Lastlight Judgment, then the board resets, the hands reset down to 0, the max power resets down to 0, but you have a slight upside of having an 8/8 Gladiator Brawler in play. That's a giant. So that's the highest upside. You don't want to have Heavy Graft in play, so I wouldn't advise that. Otherwise, your opponent gets a 3/3 Valkyrie. Slumbering Stone could have worked if it was in the previous iteration of the card when you created the Gargoyle directly in play, but right now, given that you are drawing that and you need 2 power to play that Gargoyle, well, that's not a great deal in my opinion, at least. And honestly, in Expedition, the biggest Entomb effect is that Waystone Gate. Well, the other one is Bottle Storm. Entomb, if it's your turn, draw 3 cards, but having 3 cards on an otherwise empty board does give you a slight head start, but you can get a head start after the boom later, and I'm going to explain that as well. When it comes to Throne, there is a card called Vargo, Red Claw. Vargo can't be killed except by damage or loss of health, and cards that can't be killed in one way or another is another way to survive the blast. So if you're playing in Throne, Vargo Red Claw based Lastlight Judgment decks should be the main ones in my opinion. But this one is not in Expedition, so I'm not gonna go through this right now at least. Can't be killed. Okay, so there are a couple of other things that say that some things cannot be killed. Den of Ordeals gives Molotin Nakava that says that some units can be killed. That's not the combo. So Crowd of Fury Heart at the end of your turn, Muster, so Crowd can't be killed this turn. Yeah, but after the nuke, next turn, he dies. Okay, so that's not a matter here. The only card that can't be killed in Expedition that actually makes at least some sense is Elos Nightmare General that says your curses can't be killed. Also, Elos is invulnerable to damage while the enemy player and each of their units are cursed. And after a suggestion from one of my Twitch TV viewers, I did make another version of this deck with Elos Nightmare General and a lot of curses, but that deck, it did have some fun games, and in about a week you're gonna see some eternal highlights on this YouTube channel as well, including Lastlight Judgment deck that is running Elos Nightmare General. But this card on its own is a joke. It's a 2-cost 3/1 that usually doesn't do anything. Well, at least right now, in my opinion, this is not a great build around. It does make for some cool deck concepts, but it's not the greatest one. So that is anyway. That is another way to get ahead when you're casting the nuke. But there are some other ways you can prepare your deck to work around, or rather after the nuke. I've already talked about Waystone Gate, but you can also prepare and just have a very low cost, low curve deck, which means you can benefit from the 0 max power earlier than your opponent. And that is by having a lot of two cost units being emblems, 4 emblems of Grotto, 4 emblems of Korosh, 4 emblems of Makar, which create 2 cost units, and you usually have the influence necessary to decimate the power, yeah, that is one of the ways. But the main way that you can win is, after Lastlight Judgment, is that you are able to draw 0 costing Soulflame Riders. Remember the clause on Lastlight Judgment, that card costs 3 less for each power that has been decimated in the game, during the course of the game. What Soulflame Rider does is something slightly similar. This one costs 3 less for each time you have decimated your power this game. And generally, because you are the one running the engine, running the Decimate engine, Soulflame Riders, when you're casting, after you're casting Lastlight Judgment, usually cost 0, which means after the fall, you are able to draw 0 costing 6/6 flyers with endurance. There's also a huge beating stick before the judgment, but I'm gonna get to that in card strategies, specific card strategies. Another thing about Lastlight Judgment: each player discards their hand and loses all of their power. That means if your opponent has a nifty keyword on themselves called Aegis on their avatar, or face Aegis, or Feegis, well then Lastlight Judgment just kills everything they have in play, everything you have in play, but their total power stands and their hand stands. They just lose their face Aegis. So this deck should also have a ton of ways of getting through the opponent's Aegis, both on their units and in general, and on face. And there are several ways to do that. One of them that is not included in this deck is a Nightmare Dragon called Aura Piercer that says your spells and curses can't be negated or stopped by Aegis. And if you'd be running such a card in this deck, then just everything dies no matter where the Aegis is. Well, there is also the fact that this dragon costs 6 and is triple shadow in an otherwise very influence-heavy deck, which makes me not want to play that. But there are several other ways for this deck to get rid of face Aegis, and I'm gonna get to them as well. So yeah, these are the things you need to know about this card, about building your deck around this card. Kill everything, cool. You just gotta have a way of getting ahead on the board as anyway with Waystone Gate, for example. Each player discards their hand and loses all of their power, so the opponent can't have Aegis on their avatar, but you have a ton of ways of stopping that as well. Night falls and never ends, which means your life total should be slightly higher than the opponent's, and that you just need some beaters on the ground earlier than the opponent has defenses. And this one costs 3 less for each power that has been decimated this game. And the last clause makes actually this deck a very mathy one. It is not all in control or all in aggro. You gotta know when to press the big, huge, shiny red button or 5-color button. And that kind of reminds me of an old combo in Magic the Gathering from the last century. Yes, the last century, from Mirage Visions, that kind of thing. That was Cadaverous Bloom and Squandered Resources, where the first one, and Prosperity, where the first card allowed you to remove a card from your hand from the game to gain 2 green or 2 black mana. Another one gave you the ability to sacrifice your lands to generate more mana. And the last one just cost X and 1 blue and allowed each player to draw X cards that you then later sacrifice to get more mana, etc., etc., etc. This kind of reminds me of that in the mathy way, because you needed to get everything in order. Obviously not directly one-to-one connected, but still that's an analogy that I have come up with. Anyway, how to play this deck. This deck is not easy to play. When it comes to all the iterations of Format C, I I believe I was at around 60% win rate after more than 70 games, but then I had a slightly worse run of several losses, which would put this at around 55 to 60%. But I believe that if you count out all the games that led to this exact build, with some suboptimal cards being here, I believe this could be at around 60%, which does not make it a tier 1 deck, and you can tech against this deck, and the mirrors are just so full of fun because everything is unexpected. But anyway, this, at least I know this is not a full-on meme deck, but it is a viable deck. It's more like a tier 2 deck, but this is a deck that has very cool and shiny plays, like just decimating the whole board and your power, and sometimes also going all in. So let me go through all the cards and say why they are here. At its base, this deck is playing a 5-color card, but at its base, it is a Time Justice Shadow deck. So at its base, it's Kerendon Control, or Kerendon different things that are happening, because this one can be mid-range, this one can be control, this can be all-in combo. Well, depends on what you're drawing, depends on what the game state is, depends on what the opponent is playing. So let's take this, let's talk through this one card at a time. 4 copies of Eloz's Elite, a 2-cost Argenport Paladin, a 1/4, that says decimate abilities don't cost you maximum power. Now this card is great, and I wouldn't be taking it out from the deck, which is a thing that some people suggested, because of 2 things. A, it's an early game blocker, and you need those against aggressive decks. And B, if you are able to get 1 or 2 decimate effects without having to decimate your max power, it makes your mid game and your late game much easier to play and much easier to math out. And you're gonna see probably in the games, even if not at the end of this video, then in the eternal highlights that are coming in the next several days, how high of an impact this card has really on the board state, on the gameplay. Next up, we have 4 copies of Eager Offering, the 3-cost 0/4 cultist that says at the start of your turn, sacrifice this to draw 2 cards. Well, you obviously could be running cards like Wisdom of the Elders, which says draw 2 cards as well, but this one has a higher influence requirement in a color that is not the main color in this deck. Eager Offering also has the off chance of blocking a 1, 2, or 3 attack unit, which means it technically gains you some health. But it also has the option of getting killed before you are able to draw 2 cards. And if I was running different colors in this deck, I would rather be running Wisdom of the Elders over Eager Offering, but there is not a ton of good card draw in Expedition, unfortunately. The other card draw in Expedition that had been run in this deck earlier was Nahid's Distillation, the 6-cost or 4-cost if you exhaust a unit while you're playing this, to draw 3 cards. But that one, well, as you can see, 12 units here, and you usually 12 units and 12 emblems, but you usually don't have them, so you're not able to play Nahid's Distillation reliably on turn 4, and you can't reliably get up to 6 power because you're decimating your own power. So Eager Offering is the best you can have for card draw. That is slightly unfortunate, but that's just what we have. Next up, 4 copies of Soulflame Rider, and usually this is a much better killer than the Giants of Waystone Gate. This is a 9-cost 6/6 flyer with endurance, a Paladin Griffin, that costs 3 less for each time you decimated your power this game. So it usually costs like 3 or 0. Usually after the fall it costs 0. And this is your main beating stick when it comes to the gameplay itself. Next up, we have 4 copies of Waystone Gate. This is the 3-cost Time Relic that says Entomb if it's your turn, which means if you kill it while playing your nuke, you get to play an 8/8 giant. But also, it has another option of paying 3 to draw a sigil of your choice from your deck, but after the 3rd use, you have to sacrifice Waystone Gate. So the ability to get sigils from your deck means that I am running 1 copy of Primal Sigil and 1 copy of Fire Sigil, alongside 4 copies of Reap, and I'm going to get to Reap in a moment. But this allows you to, A, draw some cards from your deck, which is cool. So you're actively using up your turn, your resources. And that's something you want to do. You want to be doing in card games. B, it can get you the off colors that you need to cast Lastlight Judgment. You usually have the remaining 3 colors because they are your main colors. So if you're playing Waystone Gate, you have Lastlight Judgment in hand, but you cannot cast it because you don't have the other 2 colors. Then you're just activating Waystone Gate twice, getting the blue, getting the red, playing them out, obviously. And then Waystone Gate is still in play and is still sacrificed, or rather killed, when you're playing Lastlight Judgment to get you to the giant. So that is a very cool combination as well. Next up we have Reap. Now this card has been called garbage by many, myself included, but I believe they, and by they I mean Direwolf Digital, already had Lastlight Judgment in their minds when they were releasing Reap 2 expansions ago in the Flame of Zolta. And that is really cool and future-looking card design when you're printing a card that does nothing. I mean, it does something because it does have card text. But then, after like half a year, there is a oh moment when you're just using this as the centerpiece of your combo. So what this one is 0 cost, but you do need 1-time influence to be able to cast this. It's a spell that says you gain 3 health, which triggers Life Force, which also has its uses, but also Decimate, gain 1 of each influence. And if you gain 1 of each influence, that already means you can cast Lastlight Judgment. But also Decimate, costing 0, which means Lastlight Judgment costs 3 less. Also, gain 3 health, which means Lastlight Judgment's Nightfall effect, is countered for 3 following turns, because you're gaining 3 health and then you're getting dealt 1 damage, 1 damage, 1 damage. So Reap has a triple benefit for playing Lastlight Judgment, and it is the best combo out there. Usually, I keep all hands that have between 2 and 5 power, Reap and Lastlight Judgment, like almost all the time. Unless I know exactly what deck the opponent is playing and I need, for example, some early defense like Aramot's Designs, or I need some card advantage like Waystone Gate. But otherwise, if I have between 2 and 5 power, Reap and Lastlight Judgment, that's a keeper in my book. Because that is the combo control aspect of this deck. Next up, we have 4 copies of Condemn. This is a 1-cost Shadow Fast spell that deals 1 damage to an enemy with Life Seal, which means you're gaining 1 health. If the enemy dies this turn, it gets Void Bound, which does not matter a lot unless you're killing something like Ephemeral Wisp. But also you may swap a card from your hand with a 1-cost card in your black market. So this is one of the cycle of the fast spells that can grab you something from your black market, the spell merchants, as you might call them. So the market does have a lot of, or rather only 1-cost cards, and I'm going to get to them in a moment at the end of the deck explanation. Shattered Hopes, 4 copies of Shattered Hopes. This is a very cool card from the Promises by Firelight campaign. It's a 1-cost Argent Port spell that says choose a card with cost 4 or more from the enemy player's hand, they discard it. But also Decimate, Shattered Hopes can't be negated or stopped by Aegis. If the enemy player has an Aegis, take it. So they lose it, you gain it. Cool. This card has also several uses. First of all, well, you're just discarding expensive, which usually means powerful cards from your opponent's hand. But also it's a 1-cost card that allows you to decimate your power, which is great on your Lastlight Judgment turns. But also, not only does it negate the opponent's Aegis, it goes through their Aegis, and also this one can't be stopped, can't be negated, and the ability of can't be negated is great against cards like Daring Griffin. The 4-cost, well, used to be 3-2, now it's a 3-1. Flying Exalted Reckless, when the enemy player plays a spell, sacrifice this to negate it. But that, if the opponent is running Elysian Flyers or Huru Flyers with this card, that means that you can just play and decimate your Shattered Hopes, get a card from the opponent's hand, kill their Griffin, and then play something like Aramot's Design or Shenra Speaks to kill everything else, or your Lastlight Judgment to kill everything else, which is very, very, very cool. And, well, yeah, also this is a 1-cost Decimate, and that's what you want to be doing in this deck, decimating your power. This is also one of the few cards that can get rid of the opponent's face Aegis. The other one is Condemn. Obviously, you can just target the opponent's face and deal 1 damage to them. You gotta be careful though, because as far as I remember, if there is an electrostatic distortion in play, which means Condemn deals 1 fewer damage, when it deals 0 damage to an enemy, I believe it doesn't get rid of the the opponent's Aegis. You have to check that out on by yourself, but that is something I just remembered right now. There's a third way of getting rid of the opponent's face Aegis, and that is with Defile. And this is a strange interaction. A 2-cost Shadow Fast spell that says kill an enemy unit with cost 3 or less, then steal it and put it into your void. Okay. So, 2-cost fast spell, kill an enemy unit with cost 3 or less. Yes, I'm running this card honestly just for this effect. But the side ability of steal it and put it into your void is very cool against decks that use some cheap void recursion, such as Ephemeral Wisp. But also, if you want to steal an opponent's unit and put it in your void, this one is getting stopped by the opponent's face Aegis on their avatar. Which means if they do have it and you defile one of their unit stays in the opponent's void, in the enemy's void, but their face Aegis goes away and you can play your Lastlight Judgment. There is also an option of banishing a relic that the opponent has while they have face Aegis, which just negates the banishes effect and strips away their face Aegis. So all of this means you have 14 ways of getting rid of the opponent's face Aegis, which means you don't need to play Aura Piercer. This should be enough, usually. Next up, we have 4 copies of Cult Deck here. There's a 2-cost Slow Shadow spell that says draw one of the top 3 cards of your deck, put the rest on the bottom. This is just searching for your Reap/Lastlight Judgment that you need, usually. Or it looks for cards like Ermod's Designs or Soulflame Rider or Waystone Gates or a power that you're needing. So this is very flexible. This is not card advantage, this is card filtering, but this is very important in the deck, for sure. Next up, 4 copies of Ermod's Designs, a 2-cost Slow Shadow spell that says kill each unit with cost 2 or less. Yes, it does kill Elos's Elite. Yes, it does kill all of your elementals from emblems, but it is very necessary against aggressive decks such as Unseen, such as Argenport or Carendon Unseen, or Elysian Flyers or stuff like that, or just early Combray aggression. Yes. Also, Ermod's Design is a way to get rid of Aegis on cheap opposing units. So if you can play Ermod's Designs into Lastlight Judgment, that means that units just die. Also, when it comes to Ermod's Designs and Banish, you gotta remember that there are effects in this game that reduce the cost of units, such as Hammer of Unity reduces the cost of units that share a type with the wielder by 1. And if your opponent is running Carendon Unseen, for example, and they have Hammer of Unity on one of their units, then all their Bismas and... what was the other one called? All their Bismas and all their Unseen Commandos cost 2 and can be killed very niftily with Ermod's Designs, which is a very cool counterplay on your part, even if the opponent does not know about it or doesn't remember about it. 2 copies of Banish, I already explained that, also kills some enemy relics like relic weapons, but also Lastlight Judgment kills those. And 4 copies of Shenra Speaks, the mid-game nuke. 5 cost double Combray slow spell, kill all units, but also has Decimate of Silence and kill all units instead. And if you are getting up to 5 power, and you don't have any more Shenra Speaks in hand, even if the Silence effect is not necessary with killing all units, you usually want to decimate that just to get your Lastlight Judgment and your Soulflame Riders cheaper. Alright, now for the power base. There are 6 seats here, 3 of Vengeance, 3 of Mystery, because usually you want as much Shadow here as possible. As you can see in the pie chart, Shadow is the most numerous color that you're needing right here. Seats of Vengeance for Elos's Elite and Shattered Hopes, Seats of Mystery for Banishes. You might also change it into 2+2+2 because you might also need some for Shenra Speaks, but that is entirely up to you. I believe the 3+3 seat ratio is currently not the best one. There are 12 emblems here, for Makar, for Korosh, for Grodov, so in the main colors. And these are here because, well, you need cards that decimate your power for cheap. And these decimate them for 0. Not only do they decimate for 0, but they give, if you're playing an emblem and you're decimating your power, that is a decimate that gives you 1 power for the turn. I mean, technically you're not gaining any max power, you're gaining 1, you're losing 1, so in the long run you're not gaining anything, but you are getting 1 temporary power for the turn, which allows you some cool mathy Lastlight Judgment plays for sure. And, well, when it comes to this deck, you really need to be careful when you're counting out how to go about casting Lastlight Judgment, when you can cast it, when you can't cast it. And rounding out, we have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 sigils that you can grab with Waystone Gate. And for a time, I did not include Primal Sigil or Fire Sigil in this deck, which meant that Reap was the only way to cast Lastlight Judgment in this one. But yeah, more than once, Waystone Gate just grabbed me Primal and Fire and allowed me to cast Lastlight Judgment, or I just got them in any other way. Which is a very good option that, well, when you're not depending on 2 pieces of the combo, but just the card itself, and you can get the influence for it in other ways, that is just very, very good. And, well, those off chances when you're drawing Fire Sigil or Primal Sigil and they're not doing anything, well, I believe that's worth the risk. Rounding out the deck is the obvious market section with 5 cards that cost 1 because condemn, and those are Seek Power. Draw a sigil of your choice from your deck. Yes, it is necessary. In my opinion, it is necessary. For a time I was running Calibrate, which grabbed you a power card or a relic from the top 5 cards of your deck, and that was slightly better because it allowed you to play Waystone, to grab Waystone Gate, but Waystone Gate is not necessary for you to win the game when you're casting Lastlight Judgment, because usually after the fall, after the nuke, you can just draw better. You can draw your Soulflame Riders or your emblems or even your Condemns, and I'm gonna get to that in a moment. Also, Seek Power over the other one or over the Chant means that you can grab your Primal or Fire Sigil if you're missing them to cast your Lastlight Judgment. So that one is necessary. Sabotage is here to get rid of Face Aegis once again, but also if people start playing some countermeasures to your deck, this can counteract them. And there are 2 cards that are very good against this deck. The first one is Transpose. It is a 1-cost primal fast spell that deals 1 damage to you, to the enemy player, and you gain an Aegis. But also you can grab a card from your black market, so you gotta be careful about Transpose. I believe this one is the least played fast spell, if it is played anywhere at all. But the ability for the enemy to gain Face Aegis at fast speed at 1 cost is very dire. I mean, there is... You can counteract this one as well. For example, you're casting Lastlight Judgment, the opponent plays Transpose, then you can just play Condemn on them. I'm not sure if you have a response window to play Condemn there. You probably don't. But if you know your opponent is playing some shenanigans or can wreck you with getting Face Aegis very fast, you just go Condemn, try your Sabotage, and try to go from there. Or you can just Sabotage preemptively if you know they're up to something. The other one being Cleansing Rain. And fun fact, this costs 4, so you can go Transpose for Cleansing Rain to have Face Aegis and to have Face Aegis once again. And this is another card that could wreck your board state if you're not careful, if the opponent has a lot of power left up. Next up we have Nahid's Faithful. Now I wanted a 1-cost unit in the market, so as if after casting Lastlight Judgment I grab a Condemn, I can get a 1-cost thing from the market. So I need a unit. That is another way of having a better plan after the fall, and that is grabbing a 1-cost unit. Now for a time I was running Bloodseeker, because after the fall this is usually a 6/7, but at the end of your turn it deals 1 damage to you, and that was very very precarious in some board states, because more often than not you will be knocked down lower on the health than the opponent is. So after the fall you're taking 1 damage after from Nightfall. You are taking 1 damage when you're playing your emblems, and that's another unfortunate fact for this deck, and you're taking 1 damage off of Bloodseeker. So then I changed it to Borderlands Lookout, but this card has been nerfed to an X2, which means it dies to almost everything. So in the end I opted to play Nahid's Faithful after a suggestion from a viewer, because this one is a 2-1 with Lifesteal. The summon effect in this deck usually doesn't matter. But that means that after the fall, if you have your 1-drop, even if it just deals 2 damage to the enemy, you're not dying from Nightfall. And that is usually all you need. Next up we have Edict of Makar. An enemy unit of your choice can block this turn, but if it's time or justice, kill it. And this one has very good interactions by killing a Grot of Stranger, by killing some cheap green units, especially that Condemn deals 1 damage, and costs 1, into Edict of Makar that costs 1, and you're gonna see it in one of the games, I believe, where this combination is really amazing. And last but not least is Draw Strength, the 1-cost Justice fast spell. Give one of your units +1/+1 this turn for each enemy unit, but also decimate the top 3 units of your deck, get +1/+1. This is here mainly because I wanted a decimate in the market, in the black market, a decimate effect that we can grab with Condemn. But as it turns out, this has another great interaction, because if you're playing the mid-range game and you're running an Elite, a Soulflame Rider, if you're running some emblems, the ability of playing a fast spell that can, I don't know, get rid of an Aegis on a unit, or just kill or deal the remaining 1 damage to a unit, into a fast spell trick that you can play, for example, on your Soulflame Rider when the Elysian Skies opponent is chump blocking with all their stuff. Then you have a tool to gaining advantage of on the board. So this one has 2 effects. The main one is obviously Decimate, but the trick part also comes into play more often than not. Okay, this has been a lot of talking. Now there are a lot of interactions in this one, and I probably missed 1 or 2, but hopefully you will see all those interactions in a couple of, or rather 3 short games I'm gonna show you in just a moment, and then we'll get back to the studio for some final thoughts. So stay tuned for some games with Format C. And in the first game, the hand is rather interesting, but it's also lacking power. This one is slightly better. It has some early game interaction with Condemn and Defile. It has Cull the Deck, which can grab you Lastlight Judgment or Reap more often than not. And yeah, let's just start off with the seed. Also, you gotta remember that in this deck you are running 6 seeds, which means you, more often than not, you want to play emblems early and leave a sigil in hand, especially if you know you're not going to be decimating them. So this is an easy one, and let's go for Waystone Gate because it can grab us all the remaining sigils. Also remember which sigils you're putting to the bottom of your deck, and if you don't need any particular influence, you just need to grab the ones that are not at the bottom of your deck. Now the opponent is playing a Huru Dangson Tapestry deck, which is a Cursed Relic and Relic based deck with Relic cost matter, things like Ali, like the 2-cost Tinker, etc, etc. But fortunately those cards are rather cheap, which means if the opponent plays a 7/7 on turn 3, we can just defile it right now. Also, I'm playing Emblem of Grotov because then next turn I will be able to play the second Emblem of Grotov and decimate my power, or do some other stuff. Now we gotta remember that this Condemn right now deals 0 damage, which makes it rather bad. Okay, Curse of Loneliness. This fortunately will die if we are able to cast Lastlight Judgment. So yeah, no relic removal in the market. We just have 4 copies of Lastlight Judgment main deck and 2 banish if if they're necessary. Now, getting this Shenra Speaks means that we could play Emblem of Korosh and just kill that flyer with decimating, but I was also thinking of just grabbing the Justice Sigil here, playing it, and being able to play Shenra Speaks next turn, because probably the opponent will play another unit. Hopefully it will be something like another one of these, or the Archgriffin Patriarch to draw them 2 or 3 cards. Yeah, Archgriffin Patriarch to draw them 2 cards. So we will be able to play Shenra Speaks, and yes, we are decimating because we want to get the decimate tick off of Lastlight Judgment and the Griffin and the Soul Flame Rider here. So play and decimate. We don't care about the silence effect right here. Also, there was an option of me to play the emblem and decimate it this turn, but here is where the mathy part is. If I played a regular power, but I decimate my power next turn, I still have 6 max power, which means I can play Soul Flame Rider and use Waystone Gate, or play the Elemental. Book Club Yeti, they have a 6-cost relic, which means Soul Flame Rider is not gonna make it this time. But I do have those. Well, Waystone Gate goes for Primal Sigil, but I do have those elementals that are just gonna block the Yeti. So I believe it doesn't matter which one I'm playing right now, one or the other, and I still have Condemn up. And there is another interaction in this deck that is rather good for you, and that is if you're decimating your power and creating those elementals, you can just take them out to the market with Condemn and grab something that matters a bit more. Now the opponent is searching for a curse. Hopefully it's Avigraft, because after the nuke, well, Avigraft is just going to be good for us. Also, Soul Flame Rider tells us that the power has been decimated twice this game, which means Lastlight Judgment costs 9, but we have Emblem of Korosh in our hand. So if we draw that right now, we can play Emblem of Korosh, decimate the... Oh wait, we don't have Primal Sigil yet. We don't have the Primal Influence yet, so we gotta start with that. We gotta go for Primal... yeah, I was thinking about that, about doing that exactly, and try to play Lastlight Attack and then play Lastlight Judgment. But then I remember that, oops, I don't have Blue Influence. And I already played a power, so that is a slight mistake that I made. But fortunately, I found a Reap, which means the Lastlight Judgment now costs 3, and I can cast it now. So as to destroy everything. Also, we are getting the Giant first, the Entomb effect, and then the Exalted effect comes into play. So the Giant is not an 8/8, it's a 10/10. It's a small benefit, but it's a benefit nonetheless. And let's give the opponent like 2 turns to surrender, maybe? I mean, the best answer to this scenario is obviously them playing Permafrost, but we are able to draw some other cards here, sooner or later. And remember, we have 3 more Lastlight Judgments in the deck. So we can pull the trigger again and again. We just need to be higher on health than the opponent for them to just die to Nightfall Lethal. And this is going to be the end of game 1. Let's head on over to game number 2. This is a rather bad hand. And remember, in this deck you can quite safely try to redraw down to 6 cards, because you can have a good hand with 6 cards in this deck. Now this one has 3 power, has all the basic colors, which is good, has Elaz's Elite, which allows us to play the more mid-rangey / control-y deck. Now the opponent cast a very interesting card, that is Journey Guide. And that means that the cards, the units they are drawing, cost less, which makes them more susceptible to Defile, to Banish, and to Ermot's Designs. But them having more power is not what I need, so I'm just killing High Prophet of Sol and probably killing the other High Prophet of Sol as well. Now for the next turn I will be able to play Elaz's Elite, decimate Emblem of Makar, and either play the Elemental, another Elite, or call the deck. Boxer goes for Nahid's Distillation now. And we did draw Ermot's Designs, which means I could just go for Cull the Deck, but I opted to go for the more aggressive route with Death Elemental here. To debate the opponent slightly into playing more units. Hopefully they will be costing less. Total Pioneer, when you draw a second card in a turn, you gain +2 max power and Magus of Celerity. That is costing 2. That is gonna die to Aramod's Designs. Emblem of Shavka, which is drawing another card, which procs +2 power from Pioneer. Which with Ash Elemental that has charge. So yeah, just a huge great turn of events. So right now I want to cull the deck, grab probably something like Shenra Speaks. I mean, I am missing a second green, but the opponent's deck seems like a very unit-based deck, and with Banish, Designs, Defile, and Shenra Speaks, I believe I should be rather okay here, unless they really go all in. And they are playing the Exalt Elemental and trying to give an Exalted unit killer, and I can't have it. I just can't have it, so I have to kill it right now and steal it. But they are playing a huge weapon on this one, giving it +4 off of Toda Pioneer, and I believe this is time to pull the trigger on Aramod's Designs, which is why I'm double blocking, because that unit has Overwhelm, and I don't want to get hit as much. So right now it's Aramod's Designs into power, into Elaz's Elite once again, but we are still missing the second green to play Shenra Speaks. Fortunately, we have the Banish, we have a blocker, which means we should be rather safe here. Ramba, we need to kill that with Banish right now. That also means we can attack here for 1, and each point of damage could matter if we're casting Lastlight Judgment without any backup. Emblem of Makar, that is another Decimate. That is not costing us any max power. And we can just attack here. So yeah, we decimated twice here. Let's grab something cool, like Waystone Gate. Attack for 3. And next turn we can either grab Fire and Primal, or we can even go for second green for Shenra Speaks. Or we can go for the very aggro route and play the Giant next turn, because we can. Yes, we can. Remember, you don't need to combo off Waystone Gate. You can just use it 3 times to get the Giant. Well, opponent, what is it going to be? Did you just get flooded? Nahid's Distillation, drawing 3 cards, sure. Into a unit, probably, yes, Toda Pioneer. And there's the Lastlight Judgment top deck, which means we can attack with both. But I also want to probably decimate 1 more power off of Emblem of Makar, so that any future Lastlight Judgments cost 0. It probably won't matter, and I'm not even sure I did it. No, I couldn't have done it in the game. I'm sorry, I should have played. I needed to play the Sigil. So yes, let's nuke the board once again. Let's have a Giant in play, and good game, my friend. All right, let's get on to game number 3 now. Alright, now this hand, 1 power, not really worth it. So let's redraw. Now this one does have Designs, does have Cull, does have Reap. We don't have time to play Reap, but we're probably getting that sooner or later. So this is going to start off with Seed of Vengeance. And let's see what the opponent does and what we draw indeed. Indeed, good sir. Emblem of Kadosh, which means I want to play just the Sigil first and try decimating Emblem of Kadosh as soon as possible. And I can go just for the Sigil and cull the deck. And probably grab a Elaz's Elite, as we don't have time to play the Offering. Crownwatch Paladin in Combray colors. It means it's going to be rather aggressive. And usually you want to start the decimating as soon as possible when you're playing Colossus Elite, which means I could either go for Emblem of Korosh here or Seed of Mystery and Reap, but those are the two cases that I want to go for sure. For example, next turn we can go Seed of Mystery, get Reap, and yeah. Opponent played Hammer of Unity there, which means we cannot block right now because it would be just be chump blocking. Decimating Reap gains us 3 health, gives us everything for cheapers, and yes, we can attack for 1, give it back, and play Soulflame Rider. Fearless Crescendo, give a unit flying, sure. Grab a card. Usually in such a situation you have to assume that the opponent is going for Wind Conjuring, so they have the +4/+4 trick. But in this case I thought to myself, well that's a Vanquish actually. So never mind, this actually happened on the next turn. So here, Emblem of Makar, decimating once again. And I believe I want to attack and just play everything that we can. I do know I have Aramod's Designs here in my hand, but that is just the safety switch if I draw Lastlight Judgment here as well. Now this is where I made a mistake because I forgot about Hammer of Unity and the opponent's unit not receiving any damage on their turn, and they played Armory's Choice and just killed my unit. I mean, I did know that they probably are running a unit or another, and I shouldn't have blocked. I should have re-aggroed the opponent, for example, just blocked with Wind Elemental and traded, but that's not what I did in the end. And that was a mistake. Unseen Commando, yeah, that one's a problem, and I believe we need to get rid of it right now. Because A, it's a blocker right now, and B, just what do? We chump block. We can't grab it with Aramod's Designs. So yeah, get the Sigil, play the Sigil. I mean, technically I could race here. I could use Waystone Gate twice on the following turn. But Kirin Ascendant destroys Waystone Gate. It's not my turn. We're not getting the Giant. The Entom effect doesn't come into effect. Now, there is Lastlight Judgment here, which means that I could play Aramod's Design now, but then I don't have any chump blockers for their flyer. Or I could try to just draw something good, like a Power, that doesn't come into play depleted, and that's what I gambled at. So right now I want to block the 4/2 with my Wind Elemental. Hopefully draw power. Yes, that's Emblem of Korosh, which I'm playing and decimating. I'm just attacking with this one so as to get the opponent lower. Yes, playing Aramod's Designs, getting the Aegis off of a unit. Decimating this so that this and future Lastlight Judgments are cheaper, destroying everything. And right now we are in a slightly worse position because A, the opponent is playing an aggressive deck that is at this point at least as aggressive as ours. But also we are 1 health lower than the opponent is, and we are running a ton of emblems here. And we are not drawing any power. So yeah, this is the randomness of Lastlight Judgment if the opponent can Kirin Ascendant your Waystone Gate away. But grabbing a Condemned is one of the better cards we could have gotten here, because A, it slightly turns the tide here, because we would go up to 5, the opponent would go down to 4. That 1 damage to face with lifesteal is very important. We are also grabbing, right now if we didn't get the Soulflame Rider, we are getting Nahid's Faithful out of the market. We have a small beater on the ground with lifesteal, and we have a Defile or other cards to get rid of their opposition. Okay, those were the games. Now let's head on back to the studio and let's talk about the deck some more. Ladies and gentlemen, let's format the hard drive, or let's reset the board state with Format C, the Lastlight Judgment deck. I do hope you enjoyed the long explanation. I mean, it had to be long because this is not an easy deck. Okay, we reap, decimate, and then play Lastlight Judgment. Yeah, that part is easy. Everything else is slightly more difficult, at least in my opinion. But what this deck does, it does have epic games, for sure. You gotta know how to redraw, what to redraw to, and it will take some practice. I don't believe this, at least this build, is tier 1 right now, but probably someone could make it better than this one currently is. The odd card out right now, the flex slot, you might call it, right now in this deck is Banish, and I had been running different cards in this slot for some time. I used to have Cast into Shadow here, but killing an enemy unit with a single faction usually did not come into effect. It didn't catch a lot of things that were running rampant. You usually did not have an option of decimating with this one, so the decimate combo was usually not working, which is why I opted to go for the straight out Banish. Another one was turn back time, because if we play Armod's Design or the mini nuke, or Shenra Speaks the medium nuke, or after the Lastlight nuke, you can just turn back time and grab it back, or you can grab back at 0 costing Soul Flame Rider or stuff like that. So these are my two other suggestions in this slot. I was running two different versions of this deck as well. One was with Elos, as I already said, Elos Nightmare General, and running some curses. The other one was with Felraug the Outcast. You know, the one that when you have 3 Primal and 3 Shadow, if this is discarded, you get to play him from your Void, which means that if you're playing Lastlight Judgment and discarding this and you have enough influence, you get to replay it. So this acts like a Waystone Gate. And I made a 4-color base version of the deck, with purpose being the higher ones and time being the 4th color, and fire just being there for the sigil. But it turned out there were a lot of problems with the influence, and I was not achieving triple primal, triple shadow almost at all. So that was a problem. Now, there is also the chant cycle, the creation, destruction, menace, tradition, and purpose chant cycle that you could be running here. But those do smooth out your curve for sure. And for example, if you take out those banishes, include one more fire or primal sigil, you could be running 1 or 2 cycles of the chant. But right now, given that Karendon colors are the base here, and Karendon did have a cargo back in set 5 and does not have a chant, well, I opted not to go for that. Technically, you could swap this Seek power for one of the chants. Which ones were they? The Tradition chant, the Purpose chant, for example, or Creation chant, or what have you. Probably, yeah, it was Creation chant, because you already have Shadow influence from Condemn to grab the Creation chant, and this one gives you the other 2 basic colors, or it can grab you fire. So it was Creation, or it was Tradition, one of those 2, instead of Seek power. But what if you already have the Primal or the Fire Sigil, and you're just looking for the other one to cast Lastlight Judgment? So I don't believe the Decimate in the market in that slot is necessary, and you already have to have Reap to be able to decimate to invoke. Also, invoking a random card usually does nothing, because usually you don't need those cards. You just want to combo into your for your Lastlight Judgment, usually with Reap or Waystone Gate, or having Soul Flame Riders later. Well, obviously in the Felraug version, given that there was a high intake of blue, I was not running Eager Offerings, I was running Wisdom of the Elders, but once again, that version was very rough around the edges, and it was much worse than this one. Alright, I believe it's already been about an hour, so it should be enough for you to have at least the medium or very high level, from medium to very high level of understanding of Lastlight Judgment as a card and this creation of destruction as a deck. Now, I hope you did enjoy the display of fireworks with this one. And remember, if you did, click on subscribe. This has been Calebovitsch signing off. See you next week. Also, side note, check in the Eternal highlights on the week of March 2nd till March 8th, or rather March 10th, because these are gonna be all highlights about Lastlight Judgment decks, plays, cards, mirror matches, other versions of this deck, etc. So stay tuned. But for now, Calebovitsch out.